and it's an honor to be here to present my research. And the title of my presentation is Grammatical Heritage and Language Maintenance, Brazilian Heritage Speakers in Contact with Italian. And I have said that part of this research was already published in a book titled Heranças Gramaticais do Português Brasileiro that I wrote with my Brazilian colleague, Vânia Cássio-Galvão, of the Federal University of Goiás, Brazil. And this presentation focuses on the description of Brazilian Portuguese as heritage language in the Italian context, based on the analysis of writing data of Brazilian heritage speakers living in the city of Lecce, in the south of Italy, in Apulia. Well, and based on this assumption, we investigate some grammatical phenomena that highlight the linguistic competence and maintenance that characterizes the Brazilian heritage speakers. It is, we intend to identify structures of maintenance of their mother tongue competence that emerge from their discourse in the Italian context and to verify to which social and functional aspects these structures are correlated. Well, to identify which phenomena bring out the linguistic communicative competence, we considered some grammatical features. The presence of morphosyntactic forms such as variable subject-verb agreement, filling the subject position, possibility versus impossibility of rising clitics, and topicalization strategies as left dislocation with resumption, topicalization, hanging topics. And the corpus consists of 18 hours of recordings in Italian and Portuguese obtained through interviews and composition written. But in our presentation, we will present results from this last kind of production of the participants, written composition in Portuguese on one or more topics. And these were the topics that the participant could choose. Saudade of Brazil, Italy, how beautiful, the crisis in the world, the future of Brazil, my wishes, my fears, in my life, what dance means to me. They are to write a text on this topic. Well, with regard to the sociolinguistic profile, we analyzed some sociolinguistic variables. A diatopic variable, state of origin, and the majority of participants came from the state of Minas Gerais. Age, the majority of participants in the entire corpus use it is concentrated in 18-25 group, but in the written composition, this age group represents only 30%, with the 26-40 age group being the most representative. Educational level, 23% of the participants are basic level, 35% medium level, 42% and higher level. And migratory flows, the participants in the corpus migrated between 1991 and 2009. And the language spoken at home are Portuguese, 75%, Italian, 12.5%, Italian Portuguese, 10%, and Portuguese and English, 2.5%. And this slide, we can see the participants divided for gender, age, educational level. We can see that we have only 26 participants in this part of sample for the written samples that we used. Well, we have to say that the grammatical phenomena that we analyzed, the first three items are correlated to the null subject in Brazilian, to the null subject, to the prodrop parameter. And we compared the Brazilian Portuguese heritage language with the neo-standard Brazilian Portuguese variety, or contemporary Brazilian Portuguese that differs from standard Brazilian Portuguese. In fact, this variety, as attested by many studies analyzing spoken language data, written language, theatrical speech, and filmic speech, is losing in the light of all series of linguistic changes the characteristics of null subject language like European Portuguese or Italian, but the same standard Brazilian Portuguese, going from prodrop to partial prodrop language. But is a process that is not yet completed in Brazilian Portuguese. Well, but what is a neo-standard? What intend for neo-standard Brazilian Portuguese? By neo-standard Brazilian Portuguese, we are referring to a variety of language which presents a series of pan-Brazilian syntactic features which, despite being neglected by didactic grammars, when not stigmatized, represent the diffusion and the acceptance in speaking and writing, monitored or not, of a variety of language which differs from standard Brazilian Portuguese. As you can see in the architecture model, the range of action of neo-standard Brazilian Portuguese along the diastratic continuum, the diaphasic continuum, and the diamesic continuum, we can see the distance between neo-standard Brazilian Portuguese and standard Brazilian Portuguese. That is very interesting. That represents a situational diglossy in the Brazilian context. Well, and to understand how standard Brazilian Portuguese differs from neo-standard, we can have a look at the pronominal verbal paradigms. The increasing use of subject pronouns is accompanied, on the one hand, by the reduction of the verbal paradigm. The verbal flexion of number and person is being reduced, as you can see in the neo-standard Brazilian Portuguese, to 3-4 endings. You can see the zero form also in the first person of plural. And on the other hand, by the restructuring of the pronominal system, with insertion of você, a gente, vocês, as personal pronouns. And based on this assumption, Brazilian Portuguese as a partial non-subject language, we will analyze our data by associating them with the positive and negative value of the prod-drop parameter. We will consider over the null pronoun subject with find verbs according to the referential hierarchy proposed by Cirino, Duarte, and Cato, given that referentiality has a translinguistic relevance in pronominalization. In our analysis, we excluded answer to yes/no question, non-pronominal of a subject, but we kept subject of formulaic expressions with epistemic verbs, as, for example, eu acho que. As for third person, null, and our subject of definite reference, in the data, we found pronominal subject with the semantic features plus minus human and plus minus specific. Well, from a quantitative point of view, we can see that the data of the 26 participants present the following results. 26 instances of our subject versus 65 of null subject, showing already a very definite situation in terms of subject expression. We have data of a prod-drop language. However, if we differentiate the participants according to variables, we may find some interesting differences that will give indication concerning the process of maintenance of syntactic construction and interference of the grammar of the majority language. We can see now in these slides that we divided according to the variables to educational level. We can see that the third group with the lower educational level, elementary school, we have that over subject with 66.67% is the preferred choice of the participants, but it's the only group that has this option as the preferred. In the other case, in the other groups, we have that the preferred option is null subject, and also while according to the variable age and according to the variable gender, we have that the preferred choice is always null subject with 69, 72%, 68%, 72.23%, 75%. And also, according to the person, we can see that we have always null subject as a preferred option of our participants. Well, then, from a quantitative point of view, the three variables show that only in the varieties of primary education do we have a filling rate close to the neo-standard Brazilian Portuguese data. And comparing these data with Duarte's 1995 to 2012 for the phonetic realization or referential subject in the urban educated varieties, New Standard, Brazilian Portuguese, or Rio de Janeiro, as in the graph, we can observe how far apart the data of our corpus are. And as for the indefinite reference, the reference subject, 8 occurrences in total, which share the same semantic features plus human, with the first and the second person being represented in our case only by the indefinite generic você, including the speaker, the filling rate in our corpus is no more than 25%. Thus, far below Duarte's 73%, as you can see in the graph. From a qualitative point of view, the Brazilian heritage speakers who participate in this research show different behaviors in relation to the following analysis parameters related to the pro-drop parameter: variable subject-verb agreement, possibility versus impossibility of rising clitics, and feeling versus non-feeling of the pronominal subject. Well, these are the occurrences of variable subject-verb agreement. I think that the first example is very interesting because we have a verb-subject order with in accusative verbs that with a variable subject-verb agreement. But this kind of construction is very common with educated Brazilian speakers in monitored and not unmonitored context. It's very common. The other three occurrences are more stigmatized and not considered as a production of less educated speakers. About the possibility of clitic rising, we can see that we have always in the occurrences that we met and we are analyzing a pre-verbal collocation where normally in Brazilian in standard Brazilian Portuguese we could have a post-verbal collocation, but in all the cases that we see we have always a pre-verbal collocation. And about the feeling of versus not feeling the pronominal subject, we can see that in addition to a survey of data concerning the syntactic properties of the referential subject found, we conducted an analysis of the use of overt null subject considering the pragmatic discursive condition that determine their distribution in Brazilian Portuguese. We met only one occurrence of overt subject for reference minus animate and plus specific. É essa a nossa esperança de poder guardar nosso país convintos que ele, nosso país, é nossa pátria e que é para ele que iremos voltar. However, the low percentage of our subject in first person, identified by the person number ending, can be considered as a consequence of the interference of the majority language grammar, the Italian, a pro-drop language. Furthermore, we did not find subject left its location with the assumption with our subject, with our pronoun, as for example, Maria ela gosta de ler romances de amor, or nor expressive subject instructions presenting a reference subject embedded and independent. The last item that we consider has to do with marked topic construction. Marked constructions indicate changes in typical functional correspondences by means of linguistic marks. It is by elements not present in a marked construction, changes in intonation and in canonical word order. Topicalization strategies are syntactic discursive phenomenon correlated to the syntax-probiotics interface. And in marked topic constructions, there is a constituent in a position with sentence prominence to promote a reference on the topic accessibility scale from accessible to active status. In other words, a referent moves from accessible to active in short-term memory and occurs in most cases in a position that does not coincide with the subject. These constructions are known as marked topic construction. We can see we have the types of marked topic construction in Portuguese, hanging topic with resumption, left dislocation with resumption, topicalization, non-canonical topicalization, anti-topic, and topic subject. The last one, topic subject, is a typical construction of Brazilian Portuguese. While hanging topic with the resumption, normally in the Brazilian grammars that analyze this kind of construction is considered a left dislocation with resumption, and non-canonical topicalization is considered as topicalization. Okay? And but despite the quantitative limits of the data in our corpus, the results confirm the assumption. We found 11 occurrences of marked topic construction, distributed as follows: 4 occurrences of hanging topic construction, 1 occurrence of hanging topic with resumption, 4 topicalization, and 2 left dislocation with resumption. And we can see analyzing topicalization in left dislocation, we can see that in the 3 of the 4 topic construction, the topic is a prepositional locative, and in the case of the non-canonical topicalization, the 4th sentence, it is the internal argument to be topicalized, while in the 2 occurrences of left dislocation with resumption, it's the subject in the first example, and the post-nominal modifier in the second to be topicalized. But with regard to the subject left dislocation construction, it should be known that it's a construction that's not common in Brazilian Portuguese, because it presents an empty category in the syntactic position of the subject in the sentence comment, but with a prosodic rupture, represented in writing by a pause by means of reticence. Meus desejos são tantos. This construction with resumption in Brazilian Portuguese, in contemporary Brazilian Portuguese, would have another subject in the sentence comment. Meus desejos, eles são tantos. With or without international rupture. But this kind of construction could be met in other language. Ines Duarte, 2008, points out that as for the subject left dislocation, the specificity of Brazilian Portuguese lies in the presence of the anaphoric resumptive pronoun without international rupture, adding that the subject left dislocation with prosodic rupture and with resumption is possible in reality, besides Brazilian Portuguese, also in other Romance language prodrop and not prodrop, such as European Portuguese, example A, and French, example B. And what about Italian? This kind of construction is very problematic in Italian for Italians and Italianists. We are 2 groups of scholars that consider this construction. The first, Lambert, Meyer, and De Cesare, consider the existence of subject left dislocation in orality without expressing an anaphoric resumptive pronoun, but with intonational rupture. For example, in sentences like Stella ha mangiato la sua torta preferita. Beruto, Simone, and others who, given the absence of clitic subject pronouns in the Italian pronominal system, rule out the study of such structure. However, most scholars do not contemplate in this question sentences such as Gianni, lui di queste cose se ne intende davvero, in which Gianni is topic and lui is the subject. And this kind of sentence is defined as left dislocation by Colombo and Graffi, but is considered by Dardano and Trifone only as a marked construction. This means that subject left dislocation with resumption, with the over pronominal, with expressed anaphoric pronoun is not considered in Italian. But we have this kind of construction. It is rare. It's rare, but it exists. Well, what about our? We arrive to final considerations. The quantitative and qualitative analysis of the data show the presence in the Brazilian heritage participants of predominantly non-pronounced subject, which, in most cases, do not conform to the neo-standard Brazilian Portuguese grammar. In fact, we found a series of asymmetries and contrasting data regarding the feeling of the pronominal subject in the writing of our informants, which proves that in the writing process, the control of heritage speakers is active, and that, according to the educational level, the writing norms come closer to the grammar of the standard variety of Brazilian Portuguese. It should be noted, however, that the small number of our subjects testifies both to the interference of the majority language and to the maintenance of the new standard grammar of Brazilian Portuguese, since the recorded cases of our subject are neither contrastive nor focused, as it happens in Italian. However, we cannot deny the present null subject in context unusual for Brazilian Portuguese, which would confirm the transfer to the majority language grammar, with the possibility of Brazilian Portuguese Italian code switching and code mixing, even in speakers with an higher level of education. It should be noted, however, that for some of the market's construction that we found, the pragmatic plan could give more than one interpretation, since they are authentic tests that should be considered as written according to the modality in which they are represented, but which, despite the medium, show clear traces of orality. In this respect, we may hypothesize that the absence of subject-left dislocation with resumption and topic-subject construction is due more to a higher control correlated to the diamesic dimension of a written sample than to the interference of the majority language, in which this type of construction is not recorded, as in the case of topic-subject, or is rare and still being defined by researchers, as in the case of subject-left dislocation with assumption. It is clear, however, that we are dealing with two intertwined systems, a two-dimensional network, in which a dominant system or another system, source language and majority language, one or the other competence emerges according to informational, social, and cognitive conditions. And this is my bibliography. And thank you for attention. Obrigado pela atenção. And I apologize for my English. I back to